Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's program. Happy New Year, and I am delighted that you're all joining us. My name is Judy Sager, and I am the Executive Director of Plan Giving at the American Technion Society. We are here today because the Genesis Circle, of which all of you are members, was created 25 years ago. And it was created to thank and recognize those of you that have included us in your estate plans or have made life income plans. And we want you to know how grateful we are both at ATS and Technion because those plans help our students, our faculty, our research, Technion, and ultimately Israel. As fellow members of the Genesis Circle, you've expressed your commitment to ATS through a very special and important form of financial support. This support is vital to Technion's future, and we wholeheartedly want to thank you for your foresight. By including ATS in your estate plans today, you are supporting the next generation of engineers, leaders, physicians, and scientists. Today, we've got an excellent program for you, but it doesn't end there. You will all receive a recording of this program in a few days, which will include my details. I'm thrilled to introduce today's speakers who will discuss something near and dear to all of us, aging and some age-related diseases like stroke and Parkinson's. Our first speaker is Dr. Nir Barzilai, who is a Technion graduate and a physician at Einstein Medical. He is also the professor of medicine and genetics and director of health and lifespan research at Einstein Medical. He studies the genetics of longevity, hypothesizing that some centenarians have protective genes that allow the delay of aging and protects them against age-related diseases. Our second speaker will be Professor Firaz Mawasi, who is an associate professor at Technion's Faculty of Biomedical Engineering, where he leads the Neurorehabilitation and Sensory Motor Neuroscience Lab. His research uses tools from behavioral and computational neuroscience and functional imaging of the brain to decipher the mechanisms that determine the extent of recovery following a stroke. Faraz completed a postdoc fellowship at Johns Hopkins Medical School before joining Technion in 2018. He is also a researcher in the Technion Healthy Aging Institute, headed by Professor Shai Shanor, and is spending this year in my hometown on sabbatical at MIT and Harvard Medical School. We are in for a real treat today as Nir and Faraz discuss the prevention of aging, diseases of aging, and what's coming next. During this program, please feel free to use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions to Nir and Faraz, and we'll get to as many questions before the end of the program as we can. It's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Nir Barzilai. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, for the kind invitation. Thank you, the ATS, for everything you're doing. And of course, thank you for the Circle members for being committed to the Technion. Before I share my slides, two fun facts. First of all, people are asking me, where did I go to college and where did I go to university? The answer is, I went to the Technion for a 7-year MD program. So it is both my college and my university, kind of unusual. People might go to university to both titles, but this is one program. Second fun fact is my father was the founder dean, one of the founder dean of the Technion Faculty of Medicine. It's possible that maybe some of you are old enough to have known him. He was himself in the circle of people who came and talked on behalf of the Technion. His claim to fame, though, I think no other dean in the world can say that he, during his deanship, recruited two, not one, but two people who became Nobel Prize laureate. It's Hershko and Shekhanovers. So it's a great pleasure for me to live in his legacy. So You know, um, life expectancy throughout human evolution, we say 100,000 years, but we argue how long it really has been. But, during this whole time, human life expectancy was between 20 and 30 years old. And it's only in the last 150 years that we did something incredible. Okay, we tripled our lifespan. But when that happened, and when we cross now the age of 60, we start getting diseases. We get first disease and its treatment, and then a second disease and its treatment. And and we end up by diseases, by treatment, and with what ends to be a bad quality of life. The reason I'm mentioning that because what we have done to get first to the age of 60 has to do with prevention. We harnessed the agriculture, we cleaned the water, we built sewers, we did vaccinations. And all those have really been those public health issues were the main things that we've done in order to get to where we are. And it's prevention. Prevention is how we're thinking about aging too. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a new history because I'll tell you right away, the aging the way we do is not necessary and we can do much better. And I'll make some points about it. So, first of all, everybody knows there's a biology of aging because you know who's young and who's old. But we know better than that because you look at your friends and you know that some of them are aging faster and some of them are aging slower. Um, and I think this is the only thing that I had when I came. I was kind of one of the pioneers to come into this field because I said, I can see the flexibility. Um, um, the second thing, so aging is, there's chronological and biological age. The second thing that is important to know, and um, that people generally don't understand, is that it's this biology of aging on a cell, on the cellular level, is what drives diseases. Okay, by the way, those diseases are nothing that killed people through evolution. So those diseases are kind of new for us. But it's not that you get disease and you get old. It's you get old and this biology drives the disease. So you can be born with genes. There's a famous gene that's called ApoE4. And if you have two copies of ApoE4, you're likely to get dementia when you're 60 or 70. You'll be dead by the time you're 80. But when you're born with these variants, you're not demented, and you're not demented when you're 1 year or 10 year or 50 year. It takes those 60 years, it takes the aging to get these diseases. And I can do the same story about each one of the diseases because aging is the major risk factor for this disease. And the third thing that you might know is that aging can be targeted. We've done it in animals, we've done it in humans. We can delay age, and in certain experiments, we can stop and can reverse it, and that's where we're going now. So our revolution is really about spending time in your health. Remember the prevention, spending time in your health rather than waiting for disease to come and treating a disease. Um, Now, the to talk just 1 minute about the biology, and I know that not not all of you have been, let's say, updated in biology. What we have in what we agree upon is something that we call hallmarks of aging. And in order to become a hallmark of aging, you have to show that something goes wrong when you're old. And if you fix it, then if it's your animals, they live healthier and they live longer. And if it's humans, they have less diseases and less mortality. Now, those are the hallmarks of aging. And I'm not going to go into them specific. I might touch about some of them eventually, but I think the major point is they're connected to each other. So you can target one hallmark and affect all the others. It's not exactly as saying the mechanisms of aging, but some of them are more mechanistic, and some of them, if you target them, they help a lot also. So targeting any of these of the hallmark result in extension of health span and lifespan in animals, and I'll talk about humans soon. So do we have an example where people have, if people live and die and they're very old, or the title of my talk, How to Die Young at a Very Old Age. Well, those four siblings were born between 1910 and 1920 in New York City. And what's kind of interesting about them is that all of them passed the age of 102. The sister on the right, who died at 102, her siblings were shocked that she died. Um, Helen, who stand on the left and died at age 110, I met her in a New York apartment when she was 100 years old and she was smoking. And I said, Helen, nobody told you to stop smoking? And she said, the four doctors that told me to stop smoking, they died. Um, and the point here is that they haven't done what we tell people to do because they actually had genes or variants that slow their aging. And those are the variants that we're trying and have been successful, not only in finding, but some of them have turned into medicines. But I want to talk about something much more important for you guys to understand, because we always worried that our centenarians, do they get sick when they're 60 years old and they're just sick for longer? Or is their health span and lifespan, does it go together? And you see that our centenarians are 20, 30 years um, healthier than control, who are much younger than them. And those are the diseases that we included in that, and we validated it. You can see this in the journal. But this is not the important thing. It's not only that they live longer and they live healthier, but they have what we call a contraction of morbidity. They're sick very little time at the end of their life. We're sick 5, 8 years at the end of their life, and they're maybe weeks. You see here that 30% of the centenarians don't have any disease, and many of them will just not wake up one night. So some of them have good exit strategy. And even the CDC, since 1993, this is data from 1993, looked at the medical costs in the last 2 years of life of somebody who dies at 100, and it's third of the cost of those who dies at 70. So we started talking about longevity dividend. And in fact, what I'm showing you is that those patients are not in the hospital. But it's not only that. What are they doing? They are traveling, they're shopping, they're building things for their grandkids. So their economical value is huge. And I'm telling you, just because politicians now have realized across the world that treating aging is an economical plan, okay? It's not just that it's good for people. Okay, so people basically can live healthy, and die one day, and it's going to be good for the economy. Now, I want to finish by several slides about what can we do, and a few things I want to tell you. First of all, you know what to do, but what I want to emphasize is you can optimize. You can optimize your exercise, can optimize your diet, can optimize your sleep and your social connectivity. All of them have biological underpinning. Okay. Um, so, for example, the best diet that works for me, and diet is very individual, is to fast for at least 16 hours every day. It has biological explanation. There are studies in humans, and this is working well for me. But some happy to be vegetarians, and some want to do Mediterranean diet. But the point is, you can optimize that. The same for exercise, for sleep, and social connectivity. If you have questions, I can answer at the end. Now, a lot of time people are saying, okay, I'll optimize that, but then I should take some supplements. And I'll tell you two problems with supplements that you should consider. First of all, we have no idea what's in the bottle. But by the way, I should start by saying supplements means you measured something and it's low, so you give it back. That's okay. But the way we use supplements is no, we take them without knowing, and we might take a lot of it. And there's a biology for if you take less or more. So we're not behaving like supplements. But the second thing is that when you combine supplements, when you take multivitamins, actually in some studies it showed that mortality is increased. um, and remember, people who are taking supplements usually also exercise and diet, so the supplements can be antagonistic to each other. Many of them are antagonistic to each other, so just taking supplements is good for the economy, but I'm not sure it's good for you. On the other hand, we have several FDA approved drugs, not approved for aging because the FDA doesn't approve for aging, but approved for other reasons. And in order to test if those FDA approved drugs really target aging, there are few things we could do. On a preclinical level, we want to show that they target, that when you put the drug on cellular system, on all cells, that they target the hallmarks of aging and make them younger. The second thing is if you give it to animals, you want to show that the animals live healthier and live longer. From the clinical point of view, you want to show that you give this drug for whatever disease, but it prevents other diseases unexpectedly because aging is the connection. Or that you, in this study, and that's a clinical study, a control study, a placebo controlled study, that you give the drug for whatever reason and it decreases not the disease specific mortality, but the overall mortality. And just not keep you in tension when we give 6 points for gero science for the hallmarks for the preclinical and 6 for the clinical point. The drugs that gets pretty much 11, 12 are SGLT2 inhibitors for SIGA, for example, metformin, biphosphonate like zoledronic acid, and the Ozempic and Manjaro drug. Okay, all of them have done what I showed you before on cells, on animals, and in studies, they prevent variety of other age-related diseases. Um, it's interesting that metformin, for example, that people think it's for diabetes, but it actually was always an aging drug. Um, this is the drug of choice if you have COVID. Because if you take it within the first 3 days of COVID, it's the only drug that showed to decrease mortality and hospitalization by 50% and long COVID by 60%. And it does the same to flu, and there are some studies suggesting the same on other drugs. And the point here is, remember, in the hallmark, there was metabolism, but there's also immunity and inflammation. And those drugs that target all the hallmarks will do all of that. It's legal for any doctor to repurpose drug. This drug metformin has been repurposed for obesity, for PCOS, for pre-diabetic, for COVID-19, for macular degeneration. People are taking it, and so why not for aging? So I want to end with several comments. What's the life expectancy of our kids and grandkids? I predict that it's likely to pass 100 on average. Other things have to happen. It's only prediction. So, and prediction about the futures is hard, as you know. So, but I want to make really two other points. It's not only for older adults. Aging research is about also people who survive chemotherapy and radiation, that survive cancer. Those therapies are aging. And I'm sure you know some women who survived breast cancer, ovarian cancer, kids that survive cancer, they get diseases early on. Also, Down syndrome is an aging disease. People who are disabled and cannot move and have the food that they should are aging rapidly. Um, It's research that's relevant to agriculture because we want to increase the shelf life of fruits and vegetables. That's also aging research. And if we want to go to Mars, we're never going to get to Mars without targeting aging first. We'll get sick on the way there for cosmic radiation and we're not coming back. So lots of reason to promote aging research. Second, it's not for rich people only. Metformin, for example, is the cheapest drug in the US formulary. If healthcare provider will say, we give metformin for wherever the doctor agrees, it will have a huge impact and they could pay it and get it back for delaying hospitalization and death. So the revolution is spend time on improving your health and not on treating your diseases. And one of my programs is from Shai Shenor. I know that you know him. I know that Firas is a collaborator on his program. We have a program project that we're renewing that. So we're all in a net of collaboration. And I think I'll stop now. And what I'd like to do is to ask Firas Mawasi, my colleague, that's doing now, we're going from an overview of aging to talk about specifically neuronal aspects of his research. And Firas, so great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to learn from you.
Yeah, thank you, Nir, so much. I just want to share my screen. Just a second. So do you see my screen?
Yes, but can you make it in full view?
All right, just a second. Do this one. So which screen do you see now? Presentation mode or?
This looks good to us.
All right, great. So thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. So thank you again, Nir and Judy, for the introduction and for the ATS for the great support. Good afternoon, everyone. So it's my pleasure to be here and present to you. So today, as Nir mentioned, I will take you through some of the challenges of age-related motor decline. I will show you some of the technologies we and others have built to fight these challenges and share a glimpse into the future of brain recovery. So we often worry about memory loss as we age, but look at these trajectories, the decline in motor function, our ability to move, grip, and walk so often happens earlier and faster than cognitive decline. So this physical decline is a major fundamental consequences of aging, as Nir also mentioned, and is the #1 threat to independence. So this is a report published 2 years ago, and it's and showed that they tracked for 18 years more than 300 people evaluating their cognitive and basic motor functions. So this is not just an inconvenience, it's a global concern. Age-related decline and diseases like stroke are leading cause of long-term disability worldwide. So in fact, as you can see here in this figure, this massive blue section on the graph, stroke dominates the burden of neurological disease. It affects over 100 million people globally, resulting in profound loss of their independence. And this is exactly where my lab comes in. So we combine basic neuroscience and engineering to propose some neurorehabilitation solutions. So our work, we work on three fronts. First, we're trying to understand how the brain learns to generate movement. And then we develop some brain-machine interfaces to make the communications between the brain and the body, and also bionic hands and also legs. And most importantly, I think what's more relevant to this talk is we're trying to translate this into neurorehabilitation for clinical populations like stroke patients. So our philosophy is simple, that longevity matters only if we can maintain function and independence. So we use multimodal approaches, combining robotics, technology, neuroimaging, and neurobiology to keep this work moving forward and to improve healthy aging outcomes. So as we all heard about the new initiative in the Technion led by Professor Shai Or, the Healthy Aging Institute, and this is exactly our approach on that institute. So today I will focus on three specific diseases and disorders, actually, that steal some of our independence and affecting our motor functions. First one is the stroke. I call it the disconnection. So it happens when a clot or a bleed physically severs the brain's command line to the body. It happens to nearly 800,000 Americans every year, so leaving behind motor deficits, impairments, and muscle stiffness. The other two disorders are more progressive disorders. So for example, Parkinson and essential tremor, these are circuit failures. In Parkinson, we see the freeze, where the brain loses its internal timing, leaving patient trapped, physically unable to initiate their walking, their steps, or even their movements. In essential tremor, it's more about noisy commands and about chaos. So it's actually 10 times more common than Parkinson. And here's as I said, the brain is noisy and sends constant chaotic errors that affecting even a very simple fine motor skills. So whether it is disconnection, the freeze, or the chaos in tremor, the effects are dramatic. The loss of independence and the ability to interact with the world. But first, regarding Parkinson and essential tremor, I think we have substantial reasons for optimism, right? We have moved from an era of limited management to an era of precise functional restorations. So here I'm summarizing the advanced, I would say, treatment for Parkinson and essential tremor. It's actually the pharmacological management and the advanced neuromodulation. For Parkinson, I think many people know that levodopa, it's a drug, it's a medication that remains the therapeutic standard for many people, and it's effectively restore dopamine function, allowing millions of people to regain some of their mobility. Similarly, for essential tremor, there is another drugs that provide reliable and first-line defense for a majority of patients. So, however, the most significant engineering advancement are in technology. And here there are two different technologies that we use in the clinics. And one of them is the deep brain stimulation, that actually it's a treatment that offer for medication non-responder patients. So it's a direct intervention. So it's an invasive methods. That we basically implant electrodes deep inside the brain to try to modulate the abnormal signal, improving some of the motor scores by large percents in Parkinson's disease. The second method here is it's more about MRI-guided focus ultrasounds. So this is, I think, what's the recent biomed industry offer us. It's non-invasive, so there is no really surgery here. And by using, we can ablact specific subcortical areas in the brain by using sound wave alone in these techniques. So without opening the skull, this recent data is very compelling, showing that we can actually affecting and reducing the tremor of these patients immediately after the MRI-guided focus ultrasound intervention. The biggest challenge, and this is where my lab actually started to focus in the last few years, is stroke. So it creates a massive population, and we're talking about survivor, like more than 7 million in the US alone. So stroke is killing a tissue in the brain and physically severing the connection between the brain and the muscles. And this leaves patients with paralysis and spasticity, like muscles turns and rigidity. And most of these patients actually cannot really, move independently. They struggle and have hard time opening their hands and even make a very principal and basic motor functions. So whether it's caused by clot, which we call it ischemic stroke, or by bleeding, hemorrhagic stroke, the result is very similar. The brain loses its ability to command the body. And for 70% of stroke survivor, the hand remains paralyzed and weak long after the event. I would like to share with you a short video from the clinics. First here, the video on the right show you the patient, his non-affected side, his non-affected hand. The movement is basically effortless. He grasped the ball, he released it, the brain sends a command, and the hand obeys almost perfectly. Now look at the other side, at the affected hand. You can see how hard he is trying. He wants to let go, but his muscles won't cooperate. His fingers are abnormally flexed. It's like the signal is stuck. And just imagine living with these frustrations every single day. Standard rehabilitation often hits a wall here by leaving these patients unable to perform basic tasks like dressing or feeding, or even tying shoelaces, that they are really affected by this kind of like impairment in their hand motor functions. So while we often see that some of these functions somehow recovers right after the stroke, the reality is that they never get back to normal level. So this is the affected side in black, and this is the non-affected side in gray, and the control, healthy control in blue. And we see that even after 6 months from the stroke, there is an incomplete recovery. These guys plateaued in a level that is far from complete functioning of the hand and the recovery as it was before the stroke. So the plateau actually leaves the patients with hand that is technically connected, but functionally unable to perform these dexterity tasks or basic motor functions. And for this, we built MRI-compatible robotics and interfaces that just think about it like a piano for rehabilitation. So it allows us to measure finger movement with engineering precision, isolating fingers function to see exactly where the deficit lies. We also use MRI scans to scan these patients in our MRI center, and we can exactly map where the wiring is broken. So this is the lesion map here. This is a lesion map of our patients showing where in the brain they had a stroke. We can see how the stroke has damage to specific pathways, including the primary motor cortex, the cortical and spinal tract. This is a really essential tracts and areas in the brain that controlling our finger movement. So this kind of like linking the lesion maps where the stroke hit the brain and the deficit in the behavior can help us not only understand the basic mechanisms related to motor deficit, but also can help us designing new rehabilitation protocols to try to help these patients and recover from their motor deficits. But before we introduce before I introduce one of our protocol, I think we must look at the preclinical work to gain some insights. The first is in monkeys. This study taught us about intensity, which is a really important factor during rehabilitation, and in particular, stroke rehabilitation to gain back their motor function. So it showed that early high repetition training is critical for motor recovery. The second study from animal work showing that in rat model, model of stroke, showed that reinforcement and enriched environment, it's very important factor to engage neuroplasticity. So these studies showed that rats that spent most of their post-stroke time in a cage with other rats, they have a lot of toys, ramp, treadmills, all of these things, they recover much more than regular animals in their normal classical cages. And this actually, for us, when we learn from these two insights, we can combine these things as a potential recipe. We get back as much function as possible. To get back as much as possible function, we need high and intense rehab training, and we also need to involve somehow reinforcement and enriched environment during that rehabilitation. And indeed, we took these biological lessons and built them directly into our rehabilitation technology. And based on these and other findings, we developed a training using, as I mentioned before, the piano chords, like a kind of like complex finger movement, and let patient train for hundreds of tries every day, all right, for a week. And we also used enriched environment where the patients get real-time reinforcement feedback while they train this task in the clinics. And indeed, we show that even chronic stroke patients, they can show very nice reduction of their impairment. They improve their functions, and this actually was backed up not only by the tasks that they were trained on, but also by testing them in a large battery of clinical assessment, where we prove that this improvement in the task specific generalizes to more clinical assessment and to more everyday tasks that these guys actually need to perform every day. So this suggests for us that these kind of things, intensity and reinforcement, is actually changing the function of these of the plastic brains of these patients, and somehow could bypass the damage and restore some of the hand functions. So what's coming next? I think it's important to recognize at this stage that the fact that stroke is heterogeneous. So it's not one size fits all. As I am sharing here this figure from the study in 2020, showing that there is a different levels of severity in stroke. One in particular, the group that keeps me up at night is the severely affected patients shown here in the dark blue here. So for these cases, a classical rehabilitation is not enough. We know that the damage is simply too large for exercise alone. Nevertheless, there is a very new study published last year in Nature Medicine showing that using deep brain stimulation over the cerebellum, which is a small part sits in the back of our brain, we can enhance recovery if we use stimulation during the rehabilitation protocol themselves. So this allows us to achieve significant function gains in severe patients, something that was considered impossible just 2 years ago. So while these are still phase 1 studies, I think the results suggest that we can somehow improve the functionality of these patients, and we can modify some of the neural circuits, something that were thought to be lost forever. So I personally and my lab at the Technion believe that convergence of advanced technology and biological insight is the future of stroke treatment. So none of this is possible without my incredible team at the Technion and the funding agency and for the support. So thank you for your attention. And I think now let's take a break and take some questions from the viewers. And Judy, will you please join us to moderate that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Faraz, and thank you, Nir, for that fascinating overview of your research. I'm sure there are questions from our attendees. So if you have a question for our speakers, please submit them in the Q&A on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. So our first question is, why don't you focus on solving the stroke issue by redirecting or actually removing the blood blocking the connections in addition to the rehab? Faraz.
Yeah, this is a good question. So basically, there is a critical time window that removing the clots can helping restoring the functions. And in many patients that we see in the hospitals and the clinical centers, the time is past. So any surgery to try to remove wouldn't help too much because the tissue is already died. So if we are lucky, and this is one of the advice for anybody, knowing that there is some symptoms for happening a stroke, so they need to react as soon as possible. And there is a drug that can solving these clots things. If you go immediately to the hospital and to the emergency and urgent care, and then you can restore most of your motor functions just after the stroke. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is for Nir. Can you explain the 16-hour fast?
Yes, terrific question. So let me tell you, when I started my research, there's one experiment that worked in all the labs of the people we call ourselves geroscientists. You take any animal and you take a group of them brothers and you put them in two groups. And to one of them, you let them eat whatever they want. And the other group, we call them caloric restriction. If it's mice or rat, we give them 40% less food, or they're eating 60% of the food. And they're going to be healthy and live 40% longer. Okay, so if they live 2 years, they live 3 years. And this is really incredible. And a lot of our research was to understand that. And people took it to mean you should have less for breakfast, less food for lunch, and less for dinner. But that's not what we did. We always brought the food in the morning. And those animals were hungry, so they finished the food within 20 minutes, within an hour. And then they were fasting 23 hours more. And we started understanding what fasting, so it's not only caloric restriction, it's caloric restriction in fasting. In fact, when we gave them food throughout the day, a little food throughout the day, they didn't live much longer. They were thinner, but they didn't live much longer. So the combination of caloric restriction and fasting was important. Now, the 16 hours is our invention, okay? We don't know if it works, but we have clinical studies to suggest that it works at least in some ways. You lose weight more, you improve your metabolism. There are many things that are helping, and they're helping. And it's a practice that started. People feel better with it. I'm intermittent fasting, okay? So I know a lot about it, and since I started doing that, my health has improved, my concentration has improved. I lost weight that I didn't need to have. So this is kind of the experiment, but you should know that there's no clinical study that shows that you're going to have less mortality or prevent other age-related disease. I also want to say that it's easy for some people, but not for everyone. Okay, I never was a breakfast person. I just need not to eat anything from 8 o'clock at night, if that's where I finish dinner, to noontime the next day.
Thank you. The next question is, do you know if the Felix bracelet is effective for helping with the essential tremor?
Yeah, I think this is a question for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Felix bracelet is actually a wristband. It's actually an FDA. It received FDA clearance to be used, and the people show that this can really help them reduce the tremor during their functioning. What I think is that it's a very nice, very good device to use to reduce the symptom of the disorders, but it's not going to solve the disorder itself. So to solve the issue with the disorder clinically, the medications and the surgery sometimes could help. And one more thing is that the wristband is actually affecting your finger and your distal muscles, which I believe is very important for our survivals as a human, because most of our functions actually depends on the fingers. This is why I care more now in my lab, that trying to understand how the brain controls our fingers and our hand movements. But think about maybe sometimes symptom can also show up in a different effectors, then that wristband would be less effective than the distal hand muscles.
Thank you. So, Nir, this is a question for you. You are studying Jewish centenarians and their families. Why Jewish? Why centenarians? And what did you discover?
Terrific. So, um, as I said, when I came to the lab, I started many people in humans. The things to do with humans and aging are a syndrome that's called progeria. Those are people who are aging really rapidly. Actually, they're kids who are dead mainly by the time they're 10 years old. But what I studied in the lab is how to elongate life, not why life is shorter. So to be a centenarian, which is rare, 1 out of 10,000, um, and and um, and I thought we should look at how come they live 20, 30 years beyond most people. Half of the people are dead when I started by age 75, now by the age of 80. And okay, so this is the reason we talk centenarians, because they are rare. The reason we took Ashkenazi Jews is not because they live longer or shorter, but because they're homogeneous for a genetic reason, a little bit unfortunate reasons, but they're genetically homogeneous. So it's gene specific, but we need between 30 to 50 times more people if we would go just, let's say, New York to everyone. Okay? This allowed us to do finding in 500, 750, now 800 people. And we did significant finding that we could validate in other populations too. So we took centenarians because they live healthy, they live longer, they have slow aging, they have genetics for that. And the reason we found the genetics because they were more homogeneous.
Thank you. Firaz, this is a question for you. If someone you know just had a stroke, what is the most important advice that you would give them?
To get as soon as possible and to react fast. So I think this is very important, and to start the rehabilitation as soon as possible. We know from animal studies, basically most in the non-human primates and also rodents, that there is a critical period after the stroke where the brain is still very upregulated for growth promoting and factors. So making early intervention highly intense and with a lot of enriched environments, reinforcement, we believe that will boost your motor functions to different levels than just making the classical intervention and waiting for a long time.
Thank you. Nir, another question for you. What would you suggest our members should do to optimize their health as they age?
So I gave an example of diet, but first of all, I want to say I'm using the word optimize and not maximize, right? If I have a 90-year-old guy who's walking 20,000 steps, what am I going to tell him? Half marathon now? You have to optimize it for an age. Um, but in exercise, I think few things are important to older people. First of all, not to do only cardiovascular, but to use all your muscle. And second is to do a lot of flexibility. A lot of elderly people hurt themselves when they step from a sidewalk or something like that, and they don't have the flexibility, and they need hospitalization and surgery sometimes. So you have to move, move, okay, all day. Like if your wife or husband ask for a cup of tea, be happy to do that because you get to move. It's going to impact your health. Do it with all your body and practice flexibility. Now, sleep is about being 8 hours in a dark room without beepers and lights and those things. Now, I'm doing that. I'm not sleeping for 8 hours, but I'm sleeping close to 7 hours. But if I didn't, I would sleep even less. As far as social connectivity, is really join the ATS webinars and you'll be connected.
That's great. Thank you. Um, okay, I have another question for you, Faraz. How do you
Okay.
see AI being involved in the early diagnosis and even prescribing therapy in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So I think the AI will definitely be involved in what we call and will drive what we call the urgent need for prediction and personalization. So today, as in most clinical rehabilitation, the gold standard is using very similar rehabilitation protocols for many people, not really trying to personalize and make precision medication and therapy and rehabilitation protocol individualized for each participants. And I think here AI will help us to prescribe individualized rehabilitation protocol, because AI can get a lot of data and information and to look at different many other factors that for us as a human it's hard to tell from the beginning. And if kind of like look at all of these things together, neuroimaging, there are biomarkers, a lot of biology biomarkers, and together we can, by the end, help to prescribe using AI algorithms for each participant that really would help the motor functions per individuals, rather than using one size fits all. There I see the AI is actually coming in, and I see that that will be really moving from the classical intervention to more precision medicine and personalized treatment for each patient.
Thank you. Nir, if you don't have any of the symptoms that metformin is given for, would you recommend taking it to stave off the possibility of developing dementia?
Um, so for dementia specifically, there are several studies. Some are association studies. In other words, they were not designed as a clinical study, as an intervention. They noticed that people on metformin have less dementia. There are some clinical studies that show that if you give metformin for a year to people with mild cognitive impairment, not dementia, but maybe on the way to dementia, it improves several things like name recall, and some other things. Um, so I think metformin is an important tool. Um, it's not, as I said, it's not FDA approved, but it has been repurposed for this, with benefits that people have noticed. You just have to convince. And look, I'm very happy about the FDA approved drugs. You need physicians for that, and I do want physicians to be involved. I don't want to kill anyone on the road to success, but on the other hand, not a lot of physicians know it. And my advice, because I'm not writing those prescriptions because I'm so involved, my advice is always find a paper on metformin, attach it to your physician, and say, I would like to be on metformin. What do you think about it? And one of two things will happen. One is that they'll call me and say, I should be on metformin. What happened? Why I didn't know about it? Or they'll say, I don't have time for bullshit. But metformin is safe drug, so I'll give it to the patient. I think metformin is really a very important public health tool. If more people will do it, there'll be less diseases in a long period of time.
Thank you. Faraz, how is
Yep.
nanotechnology, robotics, and other high tech helping your particular field?
Yeah, it's so well, I can divide that in different parts. For example, like we built our robotic devices in the Technion, and we also can develop some of these techniques. And I think these kind of like robotics gives us precise measurements of the impairment. So all of the clinical assessment that we have today, in the physical therapy and the clinics are really poorly describing the ability of the motor functions. For example, per finger, per directions, and then comparing the two different fingers. So we need to develop devices to better and precisely measure the motor symptoms. For that, we need an advanced robotics. This one first. Second one, we need advanced robotics for rehabilitation as well. So we need to, to design algorithms to try to kind of like make the robot-human interaction to try to help, at least for the severe patient, they cannot by themselves make a movement. We can try to change the weights between the cooperation between the robots and the patients, and together we can prescribe a rehabilitation protocol per individuals. There I see the robot actually coming in. And today there's a lot of what we call remote robots and remote in-home robots that there's some biomed companies actually developing devices that they can use at home using the same principle. Try to make try to practice as much as you could. And in your own space at the home, you can repeat that movement using some interface in the monitor or the screen with a remote physician to use that robot to enhance your motor functions. This is where the robots comes in. We also need advances in neuroimaging. We need better tools to look at the brains, better tools to look at specific areas and what is the overlap between the lesion and specific tractographies and pathways in the brain. Without advanced technology, we cannot really get to that resolution in human, all right? And as I said before, I do have some collaborators with people that working with animals, a model of stroke. And there, I think there's much more advances in the neuromodulation techniques. For example, optogenetics and all of these electrode neuropixel recordings. So there is a lot of advantages of using that advanced tools to gain much more insight for our basic understandings. And by the end, I do believe that combining all these together will bridge the gap between the basic science to the clinical and try to help patients recovering from their motor function.
Thank you. Nir, how can you evaluate the effect of music, listening, performing therapy on the aging process?
So I'll give you several examples, or I'll give you one example, really, because I became aware of that only recently in a New York Academy of Medicine symposium where elderly people were engaged in musical program that included a variety of things, but going to concerts and other things. And they followed those people, and they showed that there's a 20 to 30% decrease in outcomes like heart diseases and other things. I don't remember exactly the rest, but there's evidence that music is good. there's evidence for Alzheimer's, and there are movies that you can see of patients with Alzheimer's who are bedridden and hardly communicate, and you put the music that they used to love or their family think that they loved, and they're getting up and dancing pretty much. Music of your youth is so much part of your personality. It's deep inside. You don't lose it with your memory, that it's a tool to get it up. So when I talk about this social connectivity, this is an example.
That's great.
I can tell you that I made my own. I call it Alzheimer's Spotify. The music's from the 60s and 70s that I like. And my kids are telling me, if you have Alzheimer, your wife will leave you, not because she doesn't like you, but she doesn't like the music.
Well, with that, I want to give a big thank you to both of you, to Nir and Faraz, for a fascinating and informative session. A special thanks to all of our listeners for joining us today. You are the support and the backbone of YES's Plan Giving program. We hope to bring you other such programs in the future. Again, we're going to record this program, so you'll receive a link in the next few days. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you, Nir and Faraz, for your time and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.